Ravi Iyer, thank you so much for coming on the Inner Edison podcast. I really appreciate it, you being here today.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. I enjoy being here. Okay.
Glad we finally got everything worked out. You sound much better and better quality. All right, we were talking before we went live about you've been a doctor for 41 years, I think you said, and you run your own you run a practice for the last 20 some years. How many years?
In the US, 27 years, yeah.
Wow. Did you run another one outside the other country?
Yeah, because I got my license in India. So and then I practiced over there for a few years before I went into research. It was research that brought me to the US as a fellow at Harvard. And from there, I got my green card. Then I got recruited to GW. Then from there, started practice. That's the whole.
What was your practice in?
Internal medicine. I enjoy solving problems. I enjoy enabling people to transcend the circumstances of their life. So a lot of it comes out of the way I have transcended circumstances myself. Um, at
And
one point in my life, I slept over bombs so that I could become a doctor.
you did what?
At one point in my life, I slept over bombs for a year
Wow.
so I could be a doctor.
Wow. So let's go to that part about how you like helping people do what you said you like to do for them, and what you did to become a doctor. Uh, so where did you sleep over bombs to be a doctor?
So when I went to medical school, I went to a medical school which was the college dorm was overrun by gangs, and on my first or second day of registering myself as a student in the medical school, I had a knock on my door, and there was a senior, about 2 or 3 years old, or a senior to me, with a small shoebox. And he says, "Iyer, put this under your bed." And I said, "Why? What is it?" So it's some bombs. So my name is on the police roster, so they can raid my room anytime. So you put this under your bed. You don't argue with somebody holding bombs. So, so I shoved it under my bed in one far corner and slept for about a year, huddled on one side of the bed. Never, you know, these were country-made bombs, so they explode on impact. So for a year, I never shook the bed. I never uh, swept under it. Never cleaned in that area. Didn't want to shake the bombs.
And was this in India?
Yeah, it was in
Well,
India.
so why was there a bomb? Why did the person have a
I
bomb?
mean, college environment was, I told you, there were gangs in control of the dorm environment. So there were rival gangs, and you had to live and negotiate and somehow survive in that structure. It was not something that you go and argue with. You find a way to survive.
No, I'm trying to understand the whole process, but especially with the gangs. So the gang are they and like the gangs? Basically, there's gangs everywhere, is what you're telling me.
Yeah, the gangs everywhere, and there are gangs who are students. So they may be students. Just because they are students doesn't mean they don't have criminality in them. So they gang up and they form uh, groups, and uh, they operate just like gangs anywhere else, except that they're also in medical college. So that's all there is.
That is just so strange to hear that there's gangs in medical colleges.
It doesn't matter. That opened to me the fact that gang behavior occurs whenever there's imbalance of power, and whenever there are no proper outlets for channelizing power. That does has nothing to do with intellectual capability or abilities these were people who had options. They were not gangsters because they didn't have options. They had a lot of options. They but being criminal or exercising gangster behavior was the easiest and fastest and most reliable way to exercise power. So they did that. And for me to survive in that element, I first had to not not be I had to first align myself with the power group, and then after having aligned myself with the power group, I had to find something that I had that nobody else had, and that was in great demand, and that was my ability to teach. So I taught them. I taught criminals to survive and to pass exams, and I was so good at it that they realized that I was a resource that could be used to better their life, and they didn't have to be trapped in this, because once they enter into gang behavior, their studies suffered. Even though they had capacity to study, they didn't really exercise that capacity. Their studies suffered, so they had to come exam time, had to pass the exam. So I was the one who used to teach them how to pass it, and that put out the word in campus that nobody used to touch Iyer. Iyer became a valuable commodity. So I became like, nobody touches him. And then one day, a couple of students from a rival gang uh, joined my class. And immediately there was a big uproar. Threats were made. People threatened that to kill them, to have inflict bodily harm on me. And that's when I did something pretty bold and crazy, but in retrospect was brilliant. I said that, okay, I teach everyone or I teach no one. And they said, well, then we're going to finish you. I said, okay, finish me, that's okay. And it was a kind of a move that in retrospect turned out to be brilliant, because they suddenly realized that, you know, they rather not kill the goose with the golden egg. And so the thing that the compromise we made was, my classes were open to everyone until 2 months before the exams, and after that, I had to restrict my classes only to my gang people. So it was a compromise, and it worked. But the upshot of it was that I became extremely good in my field. By the time I went for my exams, I had passed every exam 2 or 3 times already. And as a result, I just used to ace my exams, and that got me out of that college to the best medical institution in the country called All India Institute. And I did my doctoral degree there. I was working on leprosy, and then the work I did there ended up getting me a fellow position at Harvard.
Wow.
So that's the story.
So from gangs to Harvard.
Yeah.
That should be the title. Uh, no, but it's just, you never understand people's childhood and how they grow up in certain things and how things are different in everywhere. Now,
Yeah. I never told this to my parents until many years later, because I was scared they would pull me out of college. I was scared that, because parents are parents, they are concerned about the safety of their children. So if I had told them that this is what my life was and this is how I actually survived and lived, they would. I know my dad, I know my mom. They would have pulled me out. They would said, "We don't rather have you alive than be a doctor." And I wanted to be a doctor. I really wanted to be a doctor.
how hard is it to get into medical school there?
When I got into medical school, there were 9 medical schools in my college, in my state, and each one had a class size of 50 to 75. Roughly 45 percent were women, and 55% were men. And then there was affirmative action. So the minorities who were historically oppressed had a bulk of the seats. So the open general category, which was the category that I was uh, applying in, there were 50,000 male candidates applying for somewhere around 50 seats.
Wow.
Um, so the selection range between the first person who got admitted to the last person who made the cut was one question wrong.
Wow.
It is the pressure is crazy.
And then they still have gangs there.
Yep. I told you, the people here think gangs come out of poverty. Gangs don't come out of poverty. Gangs come out of inequality of power structure and inability to find options to exercise power in a safe and legitimate way.
And are you talking countrywide or are you talking
Human wide,
statewide? Huh?
humanity wide. That's the same.
So what was the power struggle there for humanity?
Oh, there it was the caste system. It was the caste system, which is a codified system of oppression and segregation that exists in India, where there are the so-called forward castes, which are and then there are the backward castes. So they were segregated by that, and social opportunities are segregated that way in a lot of rural India. So India is now, of course, it's a big powerhouse now. I mean, but the caste system still exists, very,
Oh,
very
really?
entrenched. Oh yeah, it's very entrenched. If you do a little Google search, you will do a Google on Indian caste system and its impact in Microsoft and Google. You will find that the caste system still operates underneath the surface in Google,
Oh, really?
because the vast majority of employees are of Indian origin, and they bring that cultural behavior here.
And so then they must think our behavior here is crazy.
Yeah.
Why are you laughing?
No, because I have some of my best friends are African American, and I've had long discussions of race and racism, and I said that, listen, human beings differentiate. They need reasons to differentiate, and they'll pull up some reason to make a distinction and a differentiation. That's the way they do it. That here they do it on basis of skin color. There they do it on basis of birth. You were born in this tribe or that tribe. It doesn't matter. You're still using some reason to discriminate, some differentiation.
Yeah, but it's not only India. It's like there's other countries that do the same thing.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
You
It's
don't get
true.
into this school, you can't get into that school, and then you can't get
Correct.
into this
Correct.
school.
In Britain, it is okay. It's whether it's this, whether it's Oxford or Cambridge. It doesn't matter. There is some stratification that people do
Well,
to,
I'm
to
even talking like preschool and kindergarten systems where
yeah.
you don't get in the right one, you can't get to the next one to get to the next one. So
Yeah. So the desire to consolidate some kind of advantage for yourself without having an equitable opportunity to win and lose is universal.
do you think India will ever change from the caste system? Or what would it be? I mean, is there
Very
a
hard.
way?
I don't think so. I
Uh,
don't think so, because it's so deeply entrenched. It goes back centuries.
right, right.
We're not talking about just 200 years or 400 years. We're talking 5,000 years of culture. They have a whole ethos of morality based on caste structure. It's extremely difficult for them to change that culture. If you're born there, you're indoctrinated in that, and it becomes difficult to live like that and move. It takes enormous courage to do that. I don't subscribe to it. My wife doesn't, but we are, even with all that, my wife and I, we are extremely vigilant about how we choose. There are times when I have told, hey, no, that thing that you just said is not right, and sometimes she has said that to me. So it'll pop up, and so I'm not ashamed to say that because I'm vigilant. But for someone who's not vigilant, they'll be defensive about it.
Is it the so you said it was in Microsoft and Google?
Oh
Is it
yeah,
and how about in the doctor's world? Because there's a lot of doctors from India.
yes, I think it's about almost 25% of the US physician population is Indian.
So
Uh,
how about
so
Kaiser?
I'm pretty sure it exists, though. I haven't experienced it,
Right.
but I'm sure it does exist.
But you're talking in those two organizations that you mentioned, they're engineers, they're certain people. Those are just people who are not, I mean, doctors are usually look at things differently than
We are
others.
trained to look at things differently. We are trained by training. We have greater opportunity to break those kind of indoctrinations. But I'm not saying that we are universally capable of it. We don't. We
Oh,
follow.
no, I'm not saying it's. I'm just didn't think we were going to go here today when I was looking at your
I
stuff.
didn't think
But
so. You asked me about
I know
bombs.
that's why I do things differently. That's why I was trying to figure out a totally different take on this. And you brought up the bomb thing, and I had to know more about that.
I
Um,
knew. I knew that would get a rise out of you.
well, it's just I've dealt with so many people on here from different countries, different things, and it's like,
No, but where I was going is I was going about what it means to me to be a physician.
right,
See, I know the conversation went into caste, but what it means to me to be a physician is what took me through that. You asked me once, what your greatest challenges or usually your greatest success? Growing up and becoming a physician in that environment proved to me that not only did I have what it takes to get to the best of the best, but that I was the best of the best. I don't know of a single physician in the world who, there may be a handful who have gone through the kind of things that I have gone. So when I talk about it with um, great confidence, not so much pride, but confidence. And it is that confidence that allowed me to navigate something like the pandemic with absolute fearlessness. Um, my staff, when the pandemic came out, we were ahead of the game in the sense that because of my background in infectious disease and dealing with tuberculosis and leprosy in research, I knew how to handle and work with dangerous organisms. So back on March 2nd, I told my staff that, hey, we are in a pandemic. I, Long before everyone started waking up to it, I said, we are going to need to do certain things. And I placed orders for respirators. I went on Alibaba.com and got one of those very fancy powered air purifying respirators, the ones that go for like astronaut stuff, for half the price it would cost for me to buy from 3M. I got it from Alibaba so I got two of those for something like $800 or $900 for two, as compared to 1,500 for one here. Uh, so one fourth of the price. So 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 my staff and we were enormously well equipped, and then we went out and started caring for people. During the entire pandemic, we were working at a distance of 6 inches from people's noses. Forget about 6 feet.
yeah, they said they don't know where that came from now.
Yeah, I know. And
I know I've heard it out of his mouth, so I knew where it came from.
and they would sneeze and cough upon us when we did those probes in their nose. Anyway, but that tells you what my attitude is to medicine and things like that. For me, being a physician is literally my life purpose. There is no doubt in my mind that I had any other purpose in my life.
Since you brought up COVID, yeah. So going through that process, was there a time where you were like, I can't believe we're doing this?
I'm sorry, your voice became very
Can you
garbled.
hear me? Can you hear
Yeah,
me? Okay.
yeah,
My question was, you brought up COVID, and I
yeah.
said, was during that whole process of what we saw and what they had us do, were you going, why are we doing this?
Why are we doing what?
whatever they had us do, like all the different things that they came up with their 6 feet, separation. We got to wear masks, cloth masks is okay, all that.
So let me back up a little bit and make sure that I say things responsibly.
Of course.
First, it was very obvious from day one that a lot of the established authorities didn't have their stories properly in sync. Second, it was also very obvious that the vast majority didn't know anything about what would constitute infectivity or risk of getting infected. The third thing was people were simply conjecturing and passing it off as science at every point. Now, having said that, how did I educate my staff and how did we protect ourselves? Right at the very beginning, I said, guys, you guys need to understand what is called minimum infective burden, which means if one virus particle gets into you, you are not likely to get infected. 3 get into you, probably not. 20 get into you, maybe not. 2,000 get into you, probably. So somewhere between 20 and 2,000 is the cutoff threshold. Now, in this thing, you have what is known as the universal cutoff threshold, where every human being, regardless of their immune status, is going to always get infected if they have a burden of exposure that exceeds a particular viral particle limit. Then you will have variation. Some people whose immunity is low will get infected at a lower burden. For us, you need to understand, just remember infective burden, and now you talk about barrier. How do you have barriers? One barrier is put yourself at some distance to it, if you can. If you can't, put something between them, between the source and you. Third, understand infective burden as not just particles coming you, but how long are the particles getting an opportunity to come into you? And that is, how quickly can you clear your air around you by circulation, by ultraviolet. So using these things, we wore shields, plastic shields. We tried to avoid wearing masks simply because, not because masks are not effective, they are poorly effective. If you have a nice cross ventilation airflow going, which we had, we would go into the cars. We would have the infected patients sitting in their cars. We would come there and before we would tell them to keep their windows up. We would come there and we would hang a plastic sheet over their windows and then tell them to lower their windows. We are standing with a hazmat suit on and I'm having just a transparent shield before me. My assistant comes here on their side view mirror, clips on a fan that blows air into the car. Now this sheet is hanging, air is blowing into the car. I just put my hands in and I work with them. Now my infective exposure is low.
Right.
Through the entire pandemic, none of my staff ever got sick. But this kind of conversation never happened on the airways. This kind of what you are hearing from me, you probably are hearing it for the first time to ever in the last 4 years. No one has ever sat down and told you what an infective burden is. Have you ever heard anyone tell you this?
No one's told me this, but
exactly.
Just so you know, I was in the military. I was in the Navy. I was a corpsman. I dealt with this kind of stuff, so I understood it.
You understood it. So this is what I'm saying. This is the knowledge that was available to my staff and to my patients. None of them had it sitting there in the White House coronavirus briefings or CDC or NIH or the airways. None of them were doing it. It was a total dereliction of the people who knew. And it is not like those people didn't know. They were being stupid.
The only reason you brought it up, so I brought it up because I know you
No,
wrote a
no,
book.
no. I know. I'm being passionate about it because
No, I know. I'm good.
even
I'm
now
happy.
I'm angry. To this day, I'm angry because this, in my opinion, was criminal dereliction of duty. Not on behalf of the political establishment. The political establishment are hacks and idiots anyway, across the board, both sides of the aisle. I don't care. The people who were derelict were the people sitting at NIH, the people sitting at CDC, the people sitting as experts, medical experts, advising the media barons. Those people were derelict.
And why do you think they were derelict? I know that, but they didn't do what they were supposed to do. But why do you think they just didn't
They
know?
No, they knew, but they didn't think.
Oh,
And they were more self-preservative than being. There was no integrity. They were not acting with integrity, and they were not acting with courage. They were acting to protect their interests, and none of those interests included the 1 million Americans who died or the 360 million Americans who were looking to them for guidance.
yeah, and it's too bad. They could have done it so much easier. I mean, so
Much
much,
easier,
and
much
better.
easier, much easier. We did 80,000 COVID tests over the span of the last 4 years. We have treated up more than 10,000 COVID patients. My case fatality rate is somewhere around, I have lost only about 15 patients so far.
Wow.
Why? And it is got nothing to do with whether I had drugs or whether I gave them this or that. I didn't give all the other, the questionable drugs that everyone wanted. I didn't do all that. But I took care of my patients the way by teaching them how to take care of themselves.
But you probably didn't have as many obese patients and other issues that.
Yeah, if you had those other things, you were already behind the eight ball, and
I mean,
you're
I don't want to say it preyed on it, but those people with those other issues were the ones that had major issues.
yes, they were already like termite-ridden oak trees waiting for a storm to blow them down.
Yeah, I was going to say something else, but that works really well.
Yeah, that is exactly how it is. You're already weakened by your system, and you keel over.
Yeah. Well, all right, so we went from bombs to COVID and back.
Yeah,
Running your practice, what would you say your greatest accomplishment? I know your greatest accomplishment was dealing with the gangs when you grew up, so that you could do anything. Was there building your practice? What was one of your biggest failures, or did you have any?
oh yeah, I have plenty of failures.
I'm just because people want to know when they start a business they don't think of doctors' offices or medical practices as businesses, but they're for profit. And, everybody has a mistake or a failure that they learn from. And I just wanted to see if you were willing to share one.
My biggest failure was it took me a long while to understand how to monetize my skills. Um, for a very long time, I was giving away care that could be very well ethically monetized uh, without, and I didn't pay attention to that. Um, One of the things that really made a shift was I have been very fortunate in having some very good staff. My staff, I have very low turnover. Um, I have three employees, and all of them have worked with me from ranging from 22 years to 10 years. So
Wow.
they're So my administrator is the lady who actually came to me one day and said that you have a responsibility to us that you are not uh, fulfilling. And I said, why? He said, you have a responsibility to be successful because we rely upon you to generate the success that we can take home to our families. And when you are not successful financially, you hurt us. It took her a lot of courage to come and tell me that. And I think that produced a shift for me. And I said, okay, then I don't know, obviously, I don't know how to be that way. So can you show me how to be that way? And then uh, we came up with a policy that we call the Three Musketeer policy. And the Three Musketeer policy is in the book by Alexander Dumas. He has a saying, one for all for one. So we sat down, brainstormed, and we said, okay, from this day onwards, each one of us is going to watch out for everyone else. And this was way before the pandemic. And we started watching out by trying to make sure that every one of us were good at our job. Not each one was just good at their job. No one cared for their job. Each one wanted to make the other person good at their job. So once that happened, that was actually the creation of my team. Because then I had a team. And once I had that within a year of doing that happened in 2012. In 2013, we got named as a top doctor practice.
Wow.
And then from that time onwards to 2024, every year we have gotten the top doctor award. And we have never looked back. And that story, the one for all for one, is actually now subject of a talk that I'm going to be giving at a healthcare leadership conference on how to build teams that are resilient, that have ownership, that will perform under all circumstances and will auto correct. There is no need to supervise. They automatically adjust with changing circumstances. So that's the hallmark of the Iyer Clinic. This one for all for one.
Wow. How do people find you if they want to get a hold of you?
Oh, just on the internet. It's my website is iyerclinic.com. If you want to come and get cared under me. If you just want to know about the stuff I do, then go to www.driyer.com. That's my umbrella site. The books I write, the speeches I give, the talks, the workshops I run, all of that. This podcast will eventually get hosted out there too. So,
how many books have you written?
I've written one book called The Reaper's Dance,
Right.
1000 Days of COVID. I just am in the last stages of finishing my second book. It's called Squirrels on My Brain. Turbocharge your teams with the superpowers of neurodiversity. And the companion workbook is the Squirrel Nut Book, companion workbook for team leaders. Wow. And so that will come out in December. And I have the outline of 3 other books on my shelf.
You just have nothing else to do? Yeah. They always say find a busy person who wants something done. So.
That's me.
Thank you so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate it. As I said, I didn't think we were going to go where we did, and I'm glad we did, though. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
All right. Make it a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.